January is one of the slowest NBA news periods. Teams are relatively established in their positioning, there are still 3 months of the playoffs, and for me personally, I find it the least interesting stretch of the NBA calendar year. But as they say, it is the calm before the storm, because the beginning of February is one of the most exciting periods of the year. All-Star Weekend strikes, and after it ends, we begin the 2-month stretch of teams either clawing for playoff spots or trying to get as deep into the lottery as possible. But February 8th marks the NBA trade deadline, the last day teams can make trades for this season. It is here that we will get the best indication of who is serious about contention, which teams are going to try and tank the last 2 months of the year, and which teams think they can contend with the 15 players already on their roster. Last season we saw the mammoth trade of Boogie Cousins to New Orleans, and this year we have already seen Blake Griffin get traded to the Detroit Pistons out of seemingly nowhere. But what other trades will we see over the next week? Which teams need to improve now, and which teams want to stockpile assets for the future? This video will cover all of these questions by examining 5 of the most likely trades and how they could potentially impact the teams involved and the league in general. But before I dive into that, I wanted to discuss the biggest factor in any trade decision made right now, the Golden State Warriors. I feel like I have talked about this ad nauseum with friends, on this channel and on Reddit, but the Warriors don't only have an impact on the court, they affect every decision made around the league. For teams such as the Spurs, Cavaliers, Raptors, Thunder and Celtics, they are right there at the top of their conferences and have good chances at making deep runs in the playoffs. But all 5 of these teams know that if they keep on winning, eventually they'll have to face the Warriors, barring some miraculous upset in the earlier playoff rounds. So the question with every trade isn't, does this make us better, but can we beat the Warriors? Because if you can't beat the Warriors, is it really worth trading future first round picks or young players and mortgaging your future? Or should teams just hold out 2 or 3 more years before going all in on contending once again? But enough lamenting on the absolute beast of a team that is the Warriors, let's dive into the 5 biggest trades that could happen this NBA trade deadline. The first trade to be discussed revolves largely around the Eastern Conference powerhouse, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whilst they may not be dominating the regular season like they usually do, they still have LeBron James, who has waltzed through the Eastern Conference to the NBA Finals for the last 7 years with relative ease. But the Warriors dismantled them last year, Isaiah Thomas hasn't filled the shoes of Kyrie Irving, and nearly every single role player is worse than the 2016 championship team. This team relies on LeBron more than ever before, and in short terms, he needs help. Badly. But the only asset that the Cavaliers have to give is the Brooklyn Nets pick, which looks likely to fall in the 5 and 10 range of the draft this season, with a small chance at a higher pick. And in such a loaded draft, this is still one of the best assets that any contending team has to give up. Trade rumours have circulated around DeAndre Jordan, Boogie Cousins, George Hill, Avery Bradley, and countless others who might slot into the Cavaliers team and help them compete this year. Most of these trades also involve the dumping of J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson in the process, allowing the Cavaliers to clear some bad contracts to balance out the value. But the biggest issue by far is the imminent threat of LeBron James leaving. Rumours are flying at an all-time high that the king is sick of his kingdom and is primed to leave the Cavaliers this offseason. He has fulfilled his promise to win a championship for Cleveland, and many feel that LeBron believes his obligation to the city and organisation is done, and that he might move to greener pastures in the offseason. If the Cavaliers trade the pick and then LeBron leaves, they would be without the best player in the history of their franchise and without a top draft pick to begin the rebuild. For this reason, I firmly believe that the Cavaliers will stand firm and keep the pick and pray that LeBron and this team can make a run for the championship and that LeBron re-signs in the offseason. The next trade I wanted to discuss is NIKOLA MIROTIC to the New Orleans Pelicans. NIKOLA MIROTIC didn't attract much attention in the offseason during his free agency and signed a partially guaranteed 2-year $25 million deal to stay with Chicago. Many felt the Bulls would try and feature him and then trade him before the deadline to gain more assets and move on from the failed experiment in Chicago. But whilst MIROTIC hasn't exactly worked out for the Bulls, there is no doubt the power forward doesn't belong in the NBA. He shoots threes at a great level, is crafty when closing out of a closeout, and uses his passing skills to never become a ball stopper on offense. He has been linked to the New Orleans Pelicans for a first-round pick, and in the wake of the injury to DeMarcus Cousins, the Pelicans are almost forced to pull this trade off. It is Anthony Davis' 6th year in the NBA, he's been an All-Star 5 times now, and is one of the best big men in the league, and somehow he has only made the playoffs once. The Pelicans have simply failed to put a winning team together around him, signing injury-prone players, signing Asik to a ridiculous deal, and dealing long-term assets for rental players has cost them over and over again. And things were just beginning to look good with Boogie and AD dominating in Twin Towers fashion. But injuries are cruel, and now the Pelicans find themselves treading water in the hunt for a playoff spot. Trading a first for MIROTIC would allow them more depth and a power forward who can spread the floor alongside Anthony Davis. But they need the Bulls to guarantee the deal before they trade him, something which is slightly risky for both parties and is holding up the whole trade due to MIROTIC's no-trade clause if the second year isn't guaranteed. But I would be surprised if this doesn't get done before the deadline and MIROTIC spends the rest of the year draining threes alongside Anthony Davis. Next up is the Clippers. The Clippers pulled off an absolute blockbuster trade when they moved Blake Griffin to the Pistons and essentially begun a full-blown rebuild. And I think that is Jerry West's plan. He's an incredibly smart front office man who helped construct the Golden State Warriors and would be fully aware that they will dominate the league for at least another 3 seasons. I wouldn't be surprised if West wants the Clippers to cash in on their players and acquire as many assets as possible and then head to the bottom of the conference and begin a full-blown tank. This would allow them to pick up as much talent as possible in a similar fashion to the 76ers and re-emerge as a force in 3 seasons' time after the peak of the Warriors and LeBron, potentially allowing them to begin their own dynasty in Los Angeles. 3 of their players, Lou Williams, Avery Bradley, and DeAndre Jordan, are all unrestricted free agents at the end of this season and could easily leave the Clippers to go to contending teams or for more money. For this reason, I think they'll look to flip as many of them as possible for first-round picks or young players. Jordan could fill a rebounding and defensive void in many teams such as Boston, the Spurs, and the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think it is the Bucks who would most likely go after him. He would fit beautifully in their center role, and they could play 3 shooters, Giannis and DeAndre, and ride spread pick and roll over and over again. Lou Williams has been linked to just about every single team that needs bench scoring, and a team would likely have to give up a first-round pick to get him, and I do think a team will bite the bullet and acquire Sweet Lou. Even though he can leave in the off-season, it appears that the trading of Lou Williams happens no matter what every single year. But Bradley might be the most interesting player of the 3. A two-way guard who can shoot threes and is a fantastic offensive option to have to go alongside a few stars. He'll almost definitely leave in the offseason to try and get paid, as he has no affinity to the Clippers, and I think they'll attempt to cash in on him. The Clippers have a backyard full of talented players that won't have the time to gel this season and see any playoff success. With all these assets, they better have a team manning the phones, because they'll be getting a lot of calls this week. Next up is Tyreke Evans, and I've done a full video on the revival of Tyreke's career in Memphis, so I won't cover his rise back to NBA relevance with improved 3-point shooting too much, but all you need to know is that Tyreke would be perfect for a team that needs a point guard off the bench and a guy that can also play minutes off ball with the starting lineup. Teams like Boston, OKC, and San Antonio might be looking to add a bigger guard like Tyreke to help them against the Warriors and to bolster their bench units. And the best thing about Tyreke is that his salary is only $3 million, making it easy to match salaries without having to give up solid young players. But whilst teams won't have to give up good young players on cheap deals, the Grizzlies will surely be asking for a first-round pick. This seems to be the asking price for any good player who's going to be traded to a top playoff team these days. I'd be surprised if Boston cashed in any assets this season to get him, as I think they are fully committed to the long-term future of Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. They'll be looking to keep acquiring assets whilst winning before going all in when the 2 young wings begin to reach their primes alongside Kyrie Irving. But OKC could be a destination for Tyreke, as the injury to Andre Roberson has left them with a huge void at the 2 guard. But this 2 guard void isn't only eligible to be filled by Evans, which brings me to the last trade option I want to discuss in this video. As mentioned before, Evans isn't the only guard up for trade. Avery Bradley, Courtney Lee, and Tyreke Evans could all fill the void left by Roberson, and I think OKC will be considering all 3 of them and more. I discussed this briefly in my video on Russell Westbrook, but I think the Thunder have to try and make a move in order to have a strong playoff run and convince Paul George to stay in Oklahoma City alongside Westbrook. Courtney Lee and Avery Bradley would be the 2 guards I would look at if I was Sam Presti, and I'd be willing to give up my first-round pick for Bradley or Lee if I could get a second-round pick in return. Both these players would provide defense and shooting at the 2 guard and would stop the Thunder having to play the young Ferguson as much or playing the defensive turnstile Alex Abrines. I think both Bradley and Lee would be up for trade for the right price, and the Thunder could acquire one of them if they were willing to part with their first rounder. Plus, Courtney Lee has more years on his contract, which allows the Thunder more security, and I think for this reason, he will be their number one target. Because if they trade for Bradley, he, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony could all become free agents this season, and trying to sign them all would be a nightmare and near impossible. And I think with Lee or Bradley, the Thunder could potentially beat the Warriors, and I'd give them a 20% chance of doing so. The defense and shooting would make them the closest thing to the Warriors in the league, and with playoff Westbrook and Paul George, who knows what would be possible. The fan in me wants to see this trade more than any of the others, as it would create another true challenger to the Warriors alongside the Houston Rockets, and it could present them their toughest road to the finals yet. But with that, it wraps up the 5 most interesting trades I think might happen this NBA deadline. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to subscribe for more NBA videos every Sunday and Thursday. And leave a comment below of what you think of these proposed trades, and if you have any other trade suggestions, leave them in the comments below.